Here are your solutions to 4-9. These are the letter problems. The graph at the right displays the temperature throughout the day. Describe the change in the temperature over time. So this is the temperature outside. So as you can see, it starts off where the temperature change, the vertical slope is fairly steep. It heats up quite a bit in the early part of the day, and then in the mid part of the day, the slope is much less steep, and at one particular point in the day, the temperature quits rising, because remember this is temperature quits rising, and now it starts cooling off. And at first it cools fairly slowly while the sun is still fairly high in the sky, and then for this portion of the graph, the temperature drops quite quickly, and then eventually the change in temperature slows through here, just like it was fairly slow here. This is where the sun would be very low in the sky, both in the morning here and in the evening here. So there's very little temperature change. In letter B, we have a graph that represents the revenue from a local clothing store. Revenue means income. It means, I shouldn't say income, it actually means just the total amount of dollars you took in sales. So we have sales on the vertical axis, and of course we have time on the horizontal axis again. And it says to describe the sales over time. This is fairly easy. So let's say that this represents, we don't really know, it doesn't say here, we don't know if this is one day or if this is a month's worth of sales. So let's talk about this as though this were 1 month's worth of sales. So obviously early in the month, sales were pretty good. The rise in sales was pretty steep. And then let's say that they had a sale, and that's why sales were so good. And then after the sale, they don't sell much for a while. And in fact, now notice that because the line dips down here, it doesn't mean that they lost money then. It means that sales were taking a dip. They were still taking in money every day, I'm sure. And then let's say that the sale was over and sales begin to pick up again, or perhaps they put on another sale. But as you can see, this steepness here is slightly less than here. So maybe this was a really good sale, a 2-for-1 sale, and they sold a lot of goods. And then things tapered off for a while and stagnated for a while, and they had average sales. And then they had another sale, but it wasn't quite as successful as the last one. Again, right in here, this little stretch here, sales tapered off, and then they came back at a fairly normal rate. But the key thing to just notice is that here, here, and here, sales were good, but in some cases better than others, and that is shown by the steepness of the slope. And here, sales were flat. They were selling, but they were not selling at anywhere near the rate they were in the other 3 cases. Letter C. We have a situation where a car is traveling at a constant speed. The car slows down steadily to come to a rest at a stoplight. Sketch a qualitative graph to represent the situation. Well, first of all, we would want to graph this in this way. We would have time on the x-axis, and we were talking about speed, so we would put speed on the y-axis. So we have a car traveling at a constant rate of speed. We can show that right there, like that. And then the car slows down steadily to come to rest at a stoplight. So it slows at a constant rate of deceleration, we would call that. So we're going to have a straight line. I meant to do that straight. A straight line until it comes to stop. When it comes to a stop, that would represent 0 speed or no speed. So your line needs to come down to the x-axis here. And that's all we need. Please do guided practice. Here are your solutions to 4-9, guided practice. The graph below displays the height of an airplane. Describe the change in the airplane's height over time. I'm going to do this the easy way here. So let's look at the way that the answer key answers this. As you can see here, the airplane takes off from the ground, so it starts out at 0 height, and its height increases as a constant rate. The reason we know it's a constant rate is because we have a straight line here, because this line from here to here is straight. The plane levels off in the air. We know that because it does not gain any altitude This doesn't have anything to do with speed, keep in mind. It's all about height. It's all about altitude. And then it descends, and again, it descends at a steady rate because we have a nice straight line. We can see that it descends at a slower rate than it ascended because the slope of the line is less steep. These are the types of things that we want you to see in these types of graphs. Problem number 2, we have Jamal purchase the same number of action figures daily for 1 week. It's because he's purchasing the same for 1 week. We would have a straight line where we have a constant rate of change. And then it says over the next week, so the distance from here to here should be the same as the distance from here, again, here to here, because there's a week in each case. A week to buy them, and then a week to sell them. He sold most of them on the internet. Sketch a qualitative graph to represent the situation. Well, over the course of a week, he sold most of them, and that's why our graph stops right here and does not go down to 0. He did not sell them all, but he sold them over a week at roughly the same rate that he had been buying them. Don't forget that you should also have labels, obviously time on the x-axis and action figures on the y. Problem number 3. Tamar rides her bicycle at a steady rate. She coasts downhill, which increases her speed at increasing rates. Sketch a qualitative graph to represent the situation. Well, we're talking about steady rate, so we're talking about speed. So we put speed on our y-axis, and again, we're talking about time. So Tamar rides her bicycle at a steady rate. That would be a flat line because we're at a steady rate. She coasts downhill, which increases her speed at increasing rates. So in other words, she didn't ride steadily and then increase the rate, but do it at a steady rate. We increased it more and more and more and more and more, so it's becoming steeper and steeper and steeper. That's the key to this right here. Increases her speed at increasing rates. So your line needs to be sloped steeper and steeper. Don't forget labels. Question number 4. Essential question. What are some advantages of displaying the relationship between two quantities using a qualitative graph? Your answer could say something like this. By displaying the relationship using a qualitative graph, you do not need to know or label the specific numerical values. In other words, you don't have to get technical with it and put hash marks and then plot points and get exact points. You can just show it generally. The qualitative graph will show whether the relationship is increasing, and this is what qualitative graphs are all about. Is the relationship increasing, decreasing, remaining constant, or some other pattern? That's the key. Please do independent practice.